Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. I am very, very excited about this webinar today. We're going to have a lot of great information imparted, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience, so if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just use the question and answer tab there on your interface and submit your questions. And we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a very interactive chat feature. So we do encourage you to please chat us your questions, comments, suggestions, whatever you want to share with us. Please do put that in the chat box and we will monitor the chat box and we might even chat you back. And then finally, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Zero Trust Security for OpenShift and Hybrid Cloud. Our speakers today are Vijay Viswanathan, who is the Staff Solutions Architect over at Red Hat, and Eric Carter, who is the Director of Product Marketing and Ecosystem Alliances over at Sysdig. Vijay and Eric, both of you, thank you so much for joining me today on this webinar. I appreciate both of you being here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
All right, Eric, I know you're going to be kicking off the conversation. I'm going to take myself off camera, put myself on mute. I'll be back around for the question and answer period.
All right. Thank you so much. So let's just take a quick look at the roadmap of what we want to do in this session. One is we'll kind of lead the conversation off with, what is zero trust? And I put beyond buzzwords here because it's like some of those other terms that come along in our industry where you potentially risk getting tired of hearing about it, but it's an important concept. So we'll describe a bit about what that is, just to set a baseline. And we'll talk a little bit about the challenges that can exist there, especially as you're moving into containers and Kubernetes. One of the areas where clearly Red Hat and Sysdig focus on with our partnership. Then we'll hand things over first to Vijay to talk about how can Red Hat help with this equation. And then I'll come back and talk about Sysdig and intro that to those of you who aren't familiar. And then, time permitting, and I think we will have time, I'll do a quick demo just to see how some of this shows up in reality. We'll get to Q&A and then, of course, the giveaway. But before we do any of that, I just wanted to try to start here with a quick poll. And I think Charlene's going to push it out. This is just a level set. I want to know the makeup of the audience who's with us today. And, I'm asking what is your primary role, but you can actually, I believe, pick more than one. Are you an IT ops or DevOps person? Do you identify with that? Are you a developer, security professional? Do you more work in the world of solutions architect, right? Or are you a compliance titled person? Clearly, we have a lot of business partners who like to join us on these sessions as well. If that's you, select that. If you're other, great, just click that. And once you submit that, we'll wait a second, and then we'll just do a quick flash of what the results are so that we can understand that. So this probably move a little bit as we talk, right?
Yeah. We're actually seeing the results in real time here, and it looks like so far there's a lot of architects on today's program. So
yeah, outpacing security as the second one there.
Which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. When you say architects, we could. Well, I guess IT operations and DevOps would also include DevSecOps, but perhaps there's some DevSecOps folks who identify more as architects. So interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and maybe that will speak when we talk about the journey, right? Maybe that speaks in a little bit to the fact that a lot of folks are in the process of trying to make sure they got this down, right? Mm-hmm. And are architecting the solutions that then will roll out, right? And that it will impact everyone else in terms of their jobs. So good stuff. Yes, that's good.
I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, Eric, if you don't mind. We can we're not going to be able to take a look at the results after the poll is closed, but before I do, looks like actually IT operations and DevOps folks are tied with architects. So there is your core audience on today's development and security, and yeah, those guys are also there as well. So
exactly.
All right, I'm going to close this out, and you can get to your presentation.
Sounds good.
Is it still on your screen?
It's still on my screen.
Okay.
But let me see if I click around a little bit and what will happen here.
Maybe we go back to the slides. I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me. All right, we're back. Excellent. Thanks everyone for participating in that. So let's get started. So what is Zero Trust? And I think at a high level, it is really this idea that whether internal or external, we want to deny all, basically verify everything, make sure that we are keeping control even within the firewall of our organization, because we should be essentially approaching what we do across our environments with an expectation of breach. And I'll get into a stat in just a minute on that. And what I found funny is just earlier when we were preparing here, someone said in the old world, this kind of security was a little bit more like an M&M where you have a hard shell and a soft inside. We allowed things internally, but policed when anyone coming through from an external world. Now we want to kind of police everything in this idea of zero trust. Another way to put it is assume no one can be trusted, right? Whether inside or outside. And that falls into users. So you and I, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of what happens on our networks, what are workloads doing, and as we talk about containers in a minute, the interaction between those workloads is really important to police those as well, or any devices that go along with that. So we want to, as it says here, authenticate, right, everything, continuously validate every interaction, right, every resource before letting anyone get into the apps or data. So it's a tall order, one could say, but think about the context. And the context is this, that there are big threats out there, big risks out there, and big impact to our business. And so just a few stats here, as I mentioned, I would go through, 98%, according to the study here, an IDC study, 90% of organizations have experienced at least one cloud breach in the past 18 months. No surprise, right? Because the attempts are happening all the time. The degree to which it damages us may vary. And then I made a joke that the other 2% just haven't figured it out yet. The real challenge is, how long does it take us to understand that happened, right? How many of you have gotten a letter in the mail, maybe, in November, that said, by the way, we experienced a breach back in February, right? So sometimes it's taking a long time to understand that something happened. And then the impact can be great, as evidenced by the dollar value here, as shown in an IBM study. So, it's real stuff. It has real impact. And we part of Zero Trust is helping to get some of this under control, for sure. And as I mentioned earlier, and when we talked about architects, it is a bit of a journey, right? There's not, none of us are going to flip a button, use one single solution or so, and be there, right? We need to go through it methodically as a process, right? We need to discover what's going on. And I'm going to show you a part of Sysdig as an example that helps you do this discovery, but you want to be able to map things like interfaces and any of the actors, any of the containers, whatever it might be, so what's out there and effectively who's talking to whom, right? You then want to be able to certainly define, right, who needs what kind of access. So we'll touch a little bit on this concept of least privilege. Only give me what I need to do my job. Only let the container do what the container needs to do, and make sure you're authorizing that effectively. And then, of course, enforce, right? We want to automate verification, the allowance of activities. We want to automate denial, for sure. And then if we can, we want to automate remediation, because things do tend to drift over time. So it's something to keep in mind. So as you're thinking about your, going down the path of zero trust adoption, these are things that you'll need to look into. So what are critical aspects for it? Now, this is kind of the world according to Red Hat and and Sysdig, but I think it's valid, right? If you can start secure, in other words, the things that you're deploying, whether it's cloud, something like Kubernetes platform, leverage solutions that really have thought about security ahead of time. That's going to plug a lot of holes that you won't have to later on. I think BJ will talk a little bit about that when it comes to Red Hat solutions. Visibility, right? You can't secure what you can't see. If you go back to that, even defining what's out there, right? You need to be able to understand. And we'll talk about the challenges that exist for containers in a minute. You want to be able to define policies, permissions, set up what it means for your business. The security folks and the compliance folks who've joined us today, that's probably a big part of what you're trying to do day in and day out. And then when you're defining those policies, make sure that they're applying to controls, things that are automating, checking the environment, things that are automating enforcement of maybe it's network traffic, user permissions, and so on. And then clearly, it kind of goes hand in hand with visibility, but detection, right? Even though we can see everything, we understand what's out there, we understand what's happening, we do want to check specifically for anomalies, unexpected behavior. And that'll come into play when I describe Sysdig's runtime security. So important stuff, things for you to think about. And again, because Red Hat and Sysdig are really partnering together around containers, Kubernetes, OpenShift, cloud native, we just wanted to highlight some of the things that we see our customers struggling with when they come to us to have conversations about how to solve it. One is the pace of change. It's much different than our bare metal and VMware environments, as an example, because these dynamic, orchestrated applications where things are coming and going very quickly really can complicate visibility, can complicate control. We did a container usage report, and we will publish a new one in the new year that really spoke to the fact that containers can come and go, sometimes a majority, or at least a big number of them, running 5 minutes or less. That 5 minute or less time span could be something risky happening. So you want to be able to keep control even in the pace of change that is very, very fast, right? Microservices, containers. Can I see inside the container? Do I understand what my containers are doing together in the interactions? Do I have the proper context? Can I see that this is in AWS cloud running on an OpenShift cluster in this project or namespace down to the container level? So those kind of pulling in not just information about what happened, but the context of where it happened will be important for you. And then permission management. This is an area that I think Red Hat has strength in, and we're doing some things at Sysdig around cloud, right? Are permissions configured correctly? If you've given everyone admin access, that's probably not a good thing. Or are all your containers running as root? Also not a good thing. So being able to manage permissions effectively, and again, least privilege, only giving just enough access to do the right job, is an important aspect to Zero Trust. All right, at this point, I think what we want to do is start describing what Red Hat can do and what Sysdig can do. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Vijay. Please take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody, for joining this conversation today. So happy to be here. And wanted to give you a quick background about myself. Eric did a great presentation so far with respect to Zero Trust and what that is. I was a developer for almost like 17 years. And during my time working on different projects, what I used to do is code my application with my fellow developers, commit the code in Git or another SCM, and then I was supremely focused on functionality, right? Get your functionality in, because that's the key thing that the business wants. Make sure it's optimized for performance, and then see how you can get it to production. But then there's the key aspect of security. It always came at the end. And I can guarantee you there are a lot of organizations still in that space. There's nothing wrong about it. It's just the way we used to do things, but it just won't work that way when we move forward, right? Because we all want to be in the cloud. We want to do cloud native development. We want to take advantage of what's available now and into the future to be able to be nimble, be agile, bring features and capabilities as quickly as possible to our customers, to our partners. And that core principle is what is driving these things, right? So no longer thinking security at the end can help with anything, including setting up infrastructure or doing development or combining all of them together. So that's when DevOps and DevSecOps and all of those things came into play. So I was a recipient, or I was party to this legacy thought, if you will, of doing things differently. Like I did code and do these things and handed it off to somebody so that it's not my problem, but it's theirs, right? But that won't be, that cannot be the modus operandi going forward. And we're going to talk about that and Sysdig's capabilities, their product, along with OpenShift, a little bit more into this conversation. So let's dive into this. So you might have seen this slide, but both me and Eric, we wanted to emphasize on this, right? Kubernetes is a lot of things. It's evolving, it's going to grow, it's here, and it's going to be here for a long time. So Kubernetes is a lot of things which have come together. So of course, at the heart of it, it's an orchestration engine, but it's much more than that because there are more and more capabilities being added to it, right? And you can do DIY Kubernetes. Nobody's stopping you from that, but you got to understand, not just standing up the cluster, it's not the be all and end all of things. Having that cluster, the day one thing, is just the beginning, and there's so much more after that. You got to maintain it, you got to manage it, you got to upgrade it at some point because newer versions of Kubernetes comes out every 4 months, so you got to be up to it, right? And then there are CVEs, there are security updates. So what do? Do you need to go figure out what to do when those things happen and where to go get those patches from? That is why getting everything right with respect to Kubernetes, the DIY Kubernetes, is so hard because there's so many pieces: the operating system, the Kubernetes version itself, and how interoperable the other entities are, say, for instance, the other applications and things like that you run along with that particular platform, right? You need to understand all of those. Is that your core capability? Probably not, because you might be developing applications for your customers in a very domain-specific thing like healthcare or insurance, and you want to be catered to that audience. Product development might not be the thing that you'll be focusing on, right? So that's where Red Hat comes in. And when you look at OpenShift, OpenShift provides you a lot of these capabilities right out of the box. Start from the bottom, that's the operating system. It's built to run on RealCore West, which is a derivative of RHEL, and it brings all the certifications and capabilities of RHEL, but it locks all of those things down. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in this conversation. Of course, OpenShift has Kubernetes within itself, but OpenShift is much more than Kubernetes. So 4.9 is the latest version that came about back in October, but with Kubernetes version 1.21. But then, as you can see from this image, there's a lot more pre-packaged, and some of you might say, hey, it's more opinionated, but it's opinionated for a good cause, right? So we work with a lot of our partners and customers. We hear a lot of feedback, what they want, and we have created the product so that it works for most of the audience out there today, right? So it has these platform services, and all of these things come to you provided as operators or Helm charts, and you don't pay anything extra to be able to leverage these capabilities. And that's what OpenShift provides. And it can run everywhere, including your on-prem bare metal infrastructure, on a virtualized infrastructure, or in the cloud. Or you can combine that as a multi-cloud architecture or a hybrid cloud architecture, whatever you prefer, and you see where your organization is going into the future. The other key aspect is most of our customers definitely run more than one cluster, right? Because even if you look at a normal deployment, there'll be an engineering setup where infrastructure folks would want to rinse and repeat how to deploy and fine-tune the OpenShift container platform, and then you could have dev test clusters, pre-plot, staging, prod, and DR. So there could be at least 4 to 5 clusters in an organization, and you would want to use the capabilities of Red Hat's advanced cluster management to manage all those clusters, not just the platform, but also the applications running within those clusters, to be able to understand what's going on behind the scenes. So Red Hat has a DevSecOps framework which identifies 9 security categories and 34 technologies that address the entire application lifecycle. Because at the end of the day, you got to understand that applications running on top of the OpenShift container platform are key to be able to service the business, right? This framework places Red Hat's built-in capabilities, DevOps tool chains, and security partner solutions at key integration points in the pipeline. You can implement some or all of these methods and technologies within a category depending on the scope of your DevOps environment and your specific requirements. Both Red Hat and Sysdig, we work together, giving you access to the expertise you need to weave the security and automation throughout the entire application lifecycle. So working together, we can help you craft a complete solution that makes security mostly automatic and nearly transparent to development and operations staff. So OpenShift, again, when I said it is secure by default, what does that mean, right? So the operating system is there, Kubernetes is there, but what makes it enterprise grade is the hardening that we do and the compliance that we meet against those standards that have been defined by those organizations. We work with the public sector organizations like DoD, which crafts these things with NIST and come out with those, and we are available everywhere, including, say, for instance, if you want to run it in the AWS government cloud or the Azure government cloud, OpenShift is available there. So it's locked down, and if your customers need that, OpenShift is there for you. Also, IDAM is a key component of this. Identification and authorization are key. You can tie it to the existing providers that you already have today. So you don't need to rip and replace everything. As part of your Zero Trust architecture and the Zero Trust model, you can mix or you can blend these things in so that you gain the maximum value out of these technologies. OpenShift intrinsically has namespaces, and you can isolate your workloads in there. You can define quotas for those so that, say, for instance, like Eric mentioned, you don't run a container which kind of occupies or consumes all of these resources that's actually available to the platform, right? So you can provide it quotas on CPU, memory, and storage to be able to restrict that so that you understand what's going on. If something is off, you can use Sysdig to understand what's going on behind the scenes, to understand if somebody has gotten and how to remediate that. Because bad things do happen, but we got to be smart about it and understand what's going on behind the scenes to be able to mitigate that as quickly as possible with less possible downtime, right? Because otherwise it affects our SLAs, and we got to pay a truckload of money to whoever we need to pay that. We want to come back to the RealCore West part of it, and there was it's derived based off of RHEL, but it's an immutable operating system. What that means is you can't do all of the operations that you would typically do on a RHEL system. You can't install additional components or packages that you would to do something that's not geared or catered towards the OpenShift container platform. The good thing is, or great thing is, you don't need to manage RealCore West separately like you would as RHEL, right? So when the OpenShift platform gets upgraded, RealCore West gets upgraded. That's why you see that RealCore West and OpenShift, their versioning is paired so that you upgrade OpenShift, you get RealCore West to get upgraded as part of that. So it's a good thing to have it, and when you run those control plane and worker node entities, RealCore West is deployed on all of them. That's the default way of the RealCore West getting deployed for OpenShift container platform. With ACM, or Red Hat's Advanced Cluster Management, you can monitor the OpenShift container platform software bits, and it gives you visibility, and that's key when you're implementing your Zero Trust to understand what's happening in real time in all of those clusters. It not only provides visibility into what's happening at a platform level, but all of those applications that are running behind or on the OpenShift application platform, and what is being consumed, what's going on. If that particular container has a challenge, you can understand those, and you can create policies that drive governance and risks and compliance for those application workloads that are running in any of those clusters, be it on-prem or in the public cloud. With that, I would like to hand it back to Eric to take you through the rest of the conversation. Eric?
Taking me a second to get all my stuff reconfigured here. Thanks, Vijay. Appreciate that. And yeah, what I want to do is step through a little bit about Sysdig and how we can help with this picture. Appreciate kind of you running through exactly what Red Hat has, and there's a lot, right? I think again, you're starting secure by design. Sysdig, for those of you who aren't familiar, you can take a second to look at this picture. Our goal is to unify cloud security, container and cloud security. So you can think about that as helping you get security visibility into, on the right side, workloads. So the things running on those OpenShift clusters, but you also, as the title of this session, right, you also may be running things both in private data centers as well as cloud. And so there's a lot of considerations, I would say, around cloud as well that you need to keep in mind as you're thinking about Zero Trust, because it's now running in a public platform that has a lot of options for you, but you need to be careful about some of those options and make sure that you're protecting yourself there. So again, unifying the idea of detecting things around public cloud as well as detecting things around OpenShift and giving you a unified way to do that. And our customers say they appreciate the fact that they have more visibility about more of the things they're running that are cloud and cloud native in a single location. Now, when we are working with our customers, and this reflects many of you on the call today, there are different roles who have different concerns around this concept of Zero Trust. So thinking about developers, as you're developing code and you're creating container images, there's concern about, are they configured correctly? Whether that's permissions, whether that is things like things like the allowed network configurations and so on. So there's a key question there of what's the right thing to do. Platform operations as well. Are we monitoring things the way that they need to be monitored so that we don't miss something that applies to this Zero Trust equation? Do I understand what's happening between my different containers in either a given service or possibly something, like the entire cluster, right? So you want to be able to have that level of visibility to be successful. Now, security folks obviously are helping to set the agenda and also want to know everyone who's involved in this mission of creating applications out on Kubernetes or OpenShift with containers. Are we following the right practices, right? And those things will be, many things around authentication, things around network security, and so on. Some of the things we've already been discussing. So a lot of things that are here, but all of them, as we mentioned earlier, require a level of visibility that if you don't have that visibility appropriately managed in your environment, you will be guessing. And that's not a good thing, right? So when we think about what are the things that we want to get visibility into, and of course, this is specifically how can Sysdig help? Let's look at a few categories. On the image side, I'm a developer, I'm developing things. How can I scan that image, not only to find vulnerabilities, which might cause us heartache, but to identify the right permissions that are there? How can I know exactly what should be fixed to meet the requirements that we have for security for Zero Trust? Right? So image vulnerabilities are really important. You really don't want to have containers with high severity vulnerabilities or wrong configurations running in the environment. When things are running, so going to the right, do you have the right level of visibility into what's happening in the environment? Some things will run through image scanning, get into the registry, and be started in an OpenShift environment. But sometimes there are ways and drift and things that happen. So we want to be able to detect things like suspicious activity. Maybe it's happening for from a zero-day threats. We all have been up in arms around, what is it called, Log4j thing that was happening over this past weekend, right? So we need to be able to know that that's happening. Auto respond, potentially stop things. And I'll show you one of the things that we can do is when we encounter something that's not in line with our controls and our policies, let's kill the container. OpenShift will spin up another one, maybe on a different node, and we can start to jump into action to understand what happened, prevent it from happening again for that response, right? On the permission side, right, you really do want to check for overly permissive access. So I'll show you something that's built into Sysdig around cloud identity entitlement management. They call it KIM for short. The bottom line is, do you have the level of visibility, whether from a tool that's provided by Red Hat, by your cloud provider like AWS or Google, or even something from Sysdig, to know what those permissions look like, to know when some are unused. Maybe we can shut them down, right? And then permitting containers and the right network segmentation is a part of this too, right? It's not a user, but it is a container. Am I controlling the communication paths? We want to implement that idea of least privilege that I've mentioned a couple times. What's really emerging lately in the market is this idea that misconfigurations tend to be a big problem. We all have the best of intentions, but there are times when we just have failed to configure something correctly. And what you should be doing in and around this concept of zero trust is continuously checking your cloud service configurations. If you're using something like Terraform to spin up your clusters, you want to be able to scan those Terraform templates, as an example, for the right configurations defined by you and your organization. And there are tools now that can help you do that. And you just want to be able to monitor when things start to get off track, what we call drift, and see if you can remediate that, and hopefully in an automated fashion. So a lot of things you can do, and a lot of those will come into play around the compliance topic, which is really not our topic today. But I know many of you probably identify with this idea that we need to be NIST or PCI compliant or SOC 2 compliant. And so the level of visibility and controls that you need, I think we can help you with. Now, one of the things, back to part of what Vijay talked about, is you may very well end up with many clusters across many locations or even providers, right, that you need to manage. And to help with that equation, as Vijay mentioned, there's Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management. Now, what we've done is taken the Sysdig solution and made an integration there with ACM so that you can deploy automatically the Sysdig solution across your clusters, so that the visibility and controls are in place, right? And that will help you address threat detection, monitoring of files, and any kind of auditing you need to do at scale. And then you can also visually see whether you are in compliance and or protected in that way along, in your clusters, along with all the rest of the stuff that ACM can provide, but also a Sysdig status, so that a new cluster came on board. Did we roll out the right tooling there or not? And you'll be able to see that. So there's a number of ways that we are trying to work together with Red Hat to make sure that you, again, have the level of control and visibility that you need. I think one of the best ways to go about sort of this next section in terms of showing you is just to get into a demo, right? And I want to share my screen now and give you some insights just into how things look, and maybe by seeing some of the tooling, it will give you some idea about what you need to take care of for your own environment. All right, so hopefully you are seeing my screen share. What I've done is I've shared my screen where I'm logged into the Sysdig SaaS solution. There's two parts here. One is called Sysdig Secure. One is called Sysdig Monitor. Monitor is more, you think about it as performance and health. We're looking more at the security visibility here. I've landed immediately here into this Kubernetes activity screen. So we've got multiple clusters, again, in the name of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. And what we're doing here is we're bubbling up a lot of issues and activity around these different clusters running. And let's say I'm running OpenShift on AWS here. I can actually drill in to see some of the, let's call them either bad things or unexpected things happening, right? And again, since I'm running on AWS, I may also be concerned with, the infrastructure, cloud infrastructure side of it as well. So we give you some level of visibility by tapping into things like CloudTrail from AWS or Google Cloud Audit Logs, as you see here. because in this zero trust thinking, like I want to know if somebody's logging in without the right credentials or without like multi-factor authentication, right? That information is being captured in this case by AWS, but I want to reflect that to you because that could be the start of bad things in and around your environment. And so the idea is then to be able to let you drill in, understand where it's happening, and look specifically at things like the events and further on drill down. But let me take a step back. So this is all about, in the name of bubbling up, things that you really should be concerned about right now in this moment. But let's talk about getting set up on the right foot, especially around when you're creating your containers. Image scanning is really table stakes these days, and it's available in various solutions. We have it in Sysdig, and I just wanted to show you, thinking about the zero trust side of things, like what kind of policies are you interested in implementing so that you're addressing some of that zero trust equation. So let's just look at a sample policy here. And there are a number of things that you can configure in a policy, but what we're doing here that I think falls in line with things like zero trust is, checking the Docker file and the definition here for what kind of ports are being exposed. Again, trying in the name of controlling some of that, what's possible to do in and around this container. Or down here, right, same thing, effective user, right? I'm going to police and look for any container that's configured as root. The challenge is when we go get a container, maybe from Docker Hub or something, like typically they are pre-configured as root. If you don't change that, that's the way it's going to run, right? And now that gives pretty much admin level access to a lot of stuff. So when you're checking your images, even before you get rolling, there are a number of things that you could be checking for with image scanning so that you're starting off on the right foot. And of course, we give you the ability to see what results there are. Am I successful in terms of, it's passed all of my policies or not, right? And you can plug into things like, Quay as a registry and do some of that, image scanning there and see exactly where am I good and where am I not good, right? As well as, look, today we might feel really comfortable, but in terms of how things look, but what happens with the new vulnerabilities that are discovered and reported tomorrow? Well, we also want to give you the ability to know when an image that's running as a container in production is actually now out of compliance, let's say. So let's say I own the Java application, and here we're organizing it by kind of the construct of your OpenShift environment and being able to look down at the project level and all the way down to things like pods to see exactly where am I exposed, maybe here with this pod that's running Cassandra, right? So it's very important so that then you can drill in and know that I'm now potentially not running within the right level of the policies that we've created. Right here, effective user, is an issue for us, and we can go in and further click on that, and we'll ask our developers to roll a new container, and away we go. Now, we also want to be able to do things like check our environment on a regular basis that we meet best practices. Now, some of these best practices are actually defined by organizations like the Center for Internet Security. And again, aligns very, very well with this topic of zero trust. So there are various, you see some here for AWS and other clouds, but I'm going to search on OpenShift because we've implemented the ability to also check your OpenShift environments and kind of understand how do I stand against kind of best practices, whether that's from how are my worker nodes configured, collapse this, things around kubelet or pod security policies, right? And if I'm not meeting that standard, let's say I take one here that is red, will help you understand what is this check really all about, right? And what is it that you can do to remediate that issue? Again, so that I am doing things like shutting down exposed ports or whatever it might look like. So again, getting started with images that are secure as we can make them, checking our environment so that it is running according to best practices and things are locked down is also important. But as Vijay explained, bad things will still potentially happen. So that's where you want to be checking for runtime events. And I don't know how many of you heard about Falco. Falco is an open source solution that's really geared toward Kubernetes. It was started by Sysdig. It is now a part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, where we've donated that, and the community is strong and growing. And what Falco is really all about is providing you with a way to implement runtime detection, where it is observing at a really low level, essentially at the system call level, for various behaviors that are codified here in various rules. And again, things like permissions, things like activity, someone shelling into a container. We've also plugged into not just at low level system call information, but things like your Kubernetes audit logs, or things like AWS CloudTrail, which I mentioned earlier. So these rules can be then put into policies that are running or monitoring your environment, right? And so that's what some of here, I'll click here, these are geared around, right? Looking for suspicious activity and things like, oh, somebody's gotten into, maybe it's a sensitive, directory or set of data. And this is kind of what Falco looks like, is essentially what's the rule, what's the condition we're looking for, and what's the output you want in order to understand what happened. Then you can take action. What we've done with these policies in Sysdig is giving you the ability to not worry about the syntax. You can if you want, but to set up these policies to monitor a part of your environment. Hopefully you can see this here, where you can dial it into a specific namespace, which we've got one for demo purposes, or you can say, this is an important thing for my entire environment. So I can actually just delete this and say, apply this to my entire infrastructure. And maybe I want to do things like stack a few rules together. I can do that. Earlier I mentioned, hey, when I encounter something that may be this bad, let's kill or stop the container. And the difference there is whether we're doing it more of a container engine level, or whether it's an orchestration Kubernetes level. And then we can do something unique that is Sysdig focused, because what you don't want is those containers to die and not have the information you need about what happened. So we have this unique thing, which I won't go into too much detail here, around capture files. Think about capture files like, for those of you who used to do things like TCP dumps or PCAP files, right? It's all of the activity surrounding an event before, during, and after, so that that's captured, system call level activity, and you have that later to go back into. Now, one of the key aspects beyond, again, controlling what's in our images, checking our environment, monitoring for bad stuff in production, is simply getting set up on the right foot around network controls. Now, these things are controls that, in the context here, are delivered by OpenShift, are delivered by Kubernetes. But what's Sysdig doing here? Well, to help you with these zero trust initiatives, and what we're looking at here is a diagram of one of my services. In this case, I love the Java app, so I'm using that. And the way that we're discovering what's happening in your environment at that low level, we're able to show you, hey, here are all of the various pieces in the environment. Let me see if I can zoom in here. The containers that are running, and here are the communication paths that are happening. Now, you may, in looking at something like this, oh, my Java app should or shouldn't be, or maybe it's okay that I'm connecting to this outside world, or maybe it's not, right? And so how am I going to control that? Well, what we're trying to do is make it easier for you to check things like ingress, what's coming in and going into my environment, and maybe decide what makes sense and what doesn't, and egress, same kind of concept, right? And to make those changes, to kind of visually see, okay, yeah, this is what I want, and then generate a policy for you. What is that policy doing, or where does it go? This is essentially a YAML file that now you can go drop in to OpenShift and make this happen from more of an infrastructure as code standpoint, right? With all the things needed to make happen what you designed in this topology, using the information that Sysdig discovered and using this kind of map, right? So that's just a helpmate to native Kubernetes tooling. And we always want to try to use what's there natively, because the community is really putting out some good capabilities and features, especially around network security policies, something important for you to do. And there's more, right? There are other things like, admission control, like maybe we want to set up policies, don't let any containers run that haven't been scanned appropriately, and so on. All of this is trying to give you the level of visibility and control you need just to have things happen the way that you want them to happen in the environment, right? So I think I will pause in terms of demo there, and let's just get back into the slides and move forward. Hopefully that gives you some level of insight into the world of Sysdig and how we might observe your OpenShift environment, observe your OpenShift environment running potentially in a public cloud. Our goal together, and why VJ and I are here talking together, is really want you to be confident about hitting your Zero Trust goals, implementing some of the things that we talked about. We'd love to engage with you to help you see how that can work for you, whether that's, again, in your own four walls of your data center or in a public cloud or both. Now, we're going to move into the Q&A session. Hopefully that was helpful. There's several places you can learn more. You can also go grab Sysdig, including a free trial out of the marketplace. If you're more interested in, hey, how are other customers doing this? There's case studies on both of our sites. And again, you can have a look at the links there while we hand things back to Charlene to take us through some of the questions.
And I am back, and so is VJ. So all three of us are on screen again. That's great. What a great presentation. And you guys know I love the demos, so I always love watching that. Guys, we have plenty of time for question and answer period. We've gotten a couple questions in, but we would love to have more. So please join the party and send along your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Let's get started with one for VJ. Oh, and this is one that seems so blatantly obvious, but it's worth asking. Where is OpenShift available?
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. We may have mentioned this, but to reiterate that it's available everywhere. You can leverage OpenShift as a self-managed cluster, like you can procure subscriptions from Red Hat, and you can go deploy it wherever you want, on-prem or on the public cloud, or both. And then you can manage the cluster by yourself. But the latest offering from OpenShift is the OpenShift Managed Services. It's available as ROSA, R-O-S-A, that's Red Hat OpenShift on AWS, or as ARO, that's Azure Red Hat OpenShift, or OpenShift dedicated on Google Cloud and AWS. So it's a team of Red Hat SRE experts managing the clusters for you on the cloud, so you can focus on building and delivering applications and business functionality to your end customers. We help you manage those clusters, and all of the functionality of Sysdig is available wherever OpenShift is available as well.
All right, great. Excuse me. Let's see. Here's a good. How does Sysdig work with what Red Hat already provides for security? So I guess, Eric, that one is for you.
Yeah, in some ways, I'll say they are complementary, but in some way you need all of it. So the nice thing about Red Hat is the stack that VJ went through. You've got the secure container engine, you've got all the tooling and the default configurations. They're all done with security in mind. So whether that's SE Linux, and they have secure authentication, encryption, and so on. Right now, where Sysdig comes in is with things like adding on top of, like, Red Hat recommends, I think, help me if I'm wrong here, VJ, Quay as a registry. Got scanning built into Quay. There are times when you may want to dive deeper, get some of that runtime visibility. So that's where Sysdig will come and play and provide that as an option, as well as pulling it into your CI/CD pipeline. So if you're doing Jenkins, or you're doing Tecton and whatnot, or what do you call it? OpenShift pipelines? OpenShift
pipelines, yes.
Yeah. So you can get visibility right there from a developer perspective, right? Or adding our runtime policy engine, which I showed you. These are all things that are additional and separate and aside that we believe adds value to the equation of being the most secure as we can be. And so in some instances, again, it is that Red Hat tool will do this and Sysdig tool will do that. Or other times we will be able to tap in to some of the information that OpenShift provides to kind of show you that. Like, and again, I showed you the network security stuff, right? You're going to take what visibility in that YAML file and you're going to put it over in OpenShift. So that's a good collaboration use case. Let me put it that way.
Awesome. Awesome. Guys, just like I said, there's plenty of time for questions. So if you do have a question, please get it on in. And I think we'll be going for about five minutes more or so on questions. Here's another one for you, Eric. What is the difference between Falco and Sysdig Secure?
Yeah, and I showed a little bit to answer this. I showed a little bit of that Falco syntax. It was on the right-hand side of the demo window, very small. But at its base level, Falco's open source, right? Yes, created by Sysdig, but it is providing kind of an engine for those rules to observe threats in your runtime environment, as well as now it itself can tap into the AWS cloud logs. It's going to tell you, and then it's sort of up to you to do something with it, right? So it's super powerful for detecting, but you want to be able to plug it into an alerting mechanism, although there's something called Sidekick that you can use for that to, go send it to my ServiceNow or PagerDuty or whatnot. Where Sysdig comes in is kind of the more broader, using that technology to provide you a UI experience, to provide you buttons to turn things on or off, to take some actions for you that you don't have, the killing of the containers as an example, or taking one of those capture files. And then to do that at scale across multiple clusters, working from a SaaS-based solution. So it uses the goodness of Falco and then takes some of the work out of it. But there are many folks who just love open source and want to do that themselves. So we encourage you to go for that, right? You can go check out more at, I think it's falco.org.
All right. Excuse me. Lito just sent in a question for you, Eric, that asked to follow up on what Eric mentioned before. Does OpenShift and Sysdig complement an organization's current tools? So what if instead a company uses GitLab, CI, or Jenkins as their CI/CD?
Yeah, I can start, and then Eric can provide more color to it. So OpenShift is not restrictive, and I can guarantee you that from personal experience, because I was a customer of Red Hat before I became an associate, and that's exactly how I used it. So we already had Jenkins to leverage that as a CI/CD pipeline, and you can set up Jenkins masters and slaves and however you want, and you can leverage those, and OpenShift does not tell you or dictate that you got to use OpenShift pipelines to be able to bring those workloads onto the OpenShift container platform. There's a many combination of things that you can do, and at the end of the day, the key aspect of that is to be able to bring those application workloads to be able to run on this OpenShift container platform. Eric?
Yeah, and as you're talking, it makes me think of why we get along so well is because of that open ethos, right? As well as open source, right? In the sense that it's not a closed ecosystem. And as I was trying to point out, that you guys have an image scanning solution, but there are times when folks are going to opt to use what Sysdig has instead. There are times when Jenkins, it's the leader, I believe, right? And it's there, and you just described how you used it. GitLab, right? It's funny because we're partners with all of these, folks. CloudBees, you're partners, we're partners. So, and then by the way, there is a plugin, right, to do what we do around Jenkins as an example, so that I can see my vulnerabilities without leaving the Jenkins interface. And so we try to make that happen. No matter what tooling you're using for this kind of cloud native space, with new things coming all the time, by the way.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking that, Lito.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, we have one more question, but there's still a little bit of time. So if anybody else has any last minute questions they want to send along our way, please do so. And Vijay, this one is for you. Does Red Hat offer an OpenShift evaluation?
Yes. Definitely, because try before you buy is still the mantra that exists. And you can go to openshift.com/try, and you can try the managed services offering or the self-managed, whichever one suits your needs, you can do that. Typically, the self-managed version of OpenShift, I think the evaluations are offered between 30 and 60 days, but managed services, that could be a little lesser than those. And it's available. You can definitely give that a shot to understand what OpenShift is, how it could fit your organizational needs, and you guys can try Sysdig as well. Like Eric was pointing out, you can go to the Red Hat marketplace, have the managed services or self-managed OpenShift cluster, do a free trial from the Red Hat marketplace for Sysdig, and have it deployed using the operator hub on OpenShift. So there's tons of options available for you to look at both our products and make best use of it.
Yeah, and I would say as a marketing guy, I don't do plain Kubernetes, but I've been in OpenShift, and I've been able to like see it click around. Again, kind of nice UI for guys like me. And you can go to there's a I don't know what you call it, left pane, where there's a selection where you can go in and you can get that operator from Sysdig to just deploy things like that. So yeah, I will vouch for that you can easily try.
All right. That's great. That's great. All right, guys. Well, we are about 5 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to leave the question and answer tab open just in case we get any stragglers in. But I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions so far. There were some really good ones. So I do appreciate that. Also, a quick reminder to the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity. After the webinar today, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are also going to be, I believe, making the slides available as part of the email that goes out. So anybody who was asking about the slide deck, you will be able to get that as well. The webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section. It should be right there waiting for you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So with that, I am going to go ahead and close out the question and answer period. And again, thank you to all of you who did submit questions. Great stuff all the way around. Before we close things out, let's go ahead and do the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner today is Kelly S. Congratulations, Kelly. Our second winner today is, yay, I think it's Takuya N. Congratulations, Takuya. Our third winner today is Lido M. Congratulations, Lido. And our fourth and final winner today is an easy one, Gerald W. Congratulations, Gerald. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Eric, Vijay, as always, what a great presentation. Great technology, great demo, great everything. So thank you so much for coming on the webinar, sharing with us your expertise and your technology. Much appreciated all the way around. Thanks again.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
I do also want to thank the audience for joining me. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody. Happy holidays. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.